Today at 1, excitement builds as England prepare for their World Cup quarter-final against France on Saturday.
Can you imagine if England beat France? That message that's going to send, not only to everybody else at this tournament, but to themselves as individuals. They just beat the former world champions. Their confidence is going to go through the roof.
After Raheem Sterling left the squad in Qatar last night to be with his family in the UK, police in Surrey confirm a burglary at his home where valuables were taken, but there were no threats of violence. Also on the programme, Labour sets out its plans for devolution if it wins the general election, including more powers for Scotland and abolishing the House of Lords.
There's a hierarchy of the family. You know, there's leaking, but there's also planting of stories.
The latest trailer for Harry and Meghan's much-anticipated documentary is released by Netflix. Living in fear of growing gang violence on the streets, we have a special report from Haiti.
This is an armoured car. Police say they were tracking it for about 2 weeks. They say it was being used by a kidnap gang.
And England's cricketers pull off a stunning victory in the first test against Pakistan.
And coming up on the BBC News Channel, can Japan do it again? After beating Spain and Germany, Croatia now stand in their way of their first ever World Cup quarter-finals.
Good afternoon and welcome to the BBC News at 1. England's men's footballers are gearing up for their World Cup quarter-final after an impressive victory last night over Senegal. They won 3-0 in Doha to set up a last-eight match against France, who are the defending champions, on Saturday. The England manager, Gareth Southgate, says the match will be the team's acid test. Meanwhile, police in Surrey have confirmed a burglary at the home of Raheem Sterling, who flew back from Qatar last night to be with his family. Well, our sports correspondent John Watson joins us now from the capital of Qatar, Doha. John.
Yes, Rita, well, that victory last night certainly has the England fans believing, doesn't it? For so long, the England supporters would watch this team in the knockout matches of major tournaments more in hope than expectation. But that has certainly changed now under Gareth Southgate. And as the focus falls on France for that quarter-final on Saturday, many will hope that this could be the chance that England could, at long last, potentially pave their way to the final and go on and win the World Cup. As Natalie Perks now reports.
In the stands at the Al Bayt Stadium, in the pubs back home, it feels good to be an England fan right now.
Fantastic game. Come on, England. We're going all the way.
It's proud to be English right now, isn't it? Come on, England!
Great result. Great performance. Clean sheet. Yeah, can't go wrong.
France is our final. We beat France, he's right. It's coming home.
When the triumphant team arrived back at their base in Al Wakra, the party was in full flow. Jack Grealish and Kyle Walker seemed to particularly appreciate the welcome. For a team proving they have strength in depth.
Shoot you. I've said it many a time, you know, he's a one-off and we need to let him enjoy playing football. He's only 19, so let him enjoy playing football, and he's been incredible this tournament, but for a long period of time now, you know, at Dortmund, so he's carried it on into this tournament, and hopefully he can just keep going from strength to strength, keep working, keep doing the things he's doing, and being a big player for England.
It strikes fear into you. Can you imagine if England beat France? That message that's going to send, not only to everybody else at this tournament, but to themselves as individuals. They just beat the former world champions. Their confidence is going to go through the roof.
In France, they're already confident. Ready to eat the lions? It's a match that's certainly mouth-watering. Natalie Perks, BBC News, Doha.
John, let's ask that question to you. How do you rate England's chances against France?
Well, obviously, they need to contend with the talents of Kylian Mbappe, France's star man. He underlined his status as one of the world's best at this tournament with 2 goals last night. How you shackle him? Well, that's a question Gareth Southgate's going to have to deal with, isn't he, before they play on Saturday. But France themselves know that England's young lions, driven by Jude Bellingham, the 19-year-old who's been one of the standout performers, Bukayo Saka as well, they have the talents to hurt France. It was interesting to hear what Phil Foden, a teammate of Jude Bellingham, said. He said that Bellingham has the chances to go on and become one of the best midfielders in world football, which is quite a statement, and I guess underlines the strength and breadth of talent that Gareth Southgate has at his disposal. 12 goals England have scored in their 4 matches so far at this World Cup. That is more than any other side. And, of course, in captain Harry Kane, perhaps finding his scoring boots at just the right time with his first goal of this World Cup last night. The only sour note, of course, was the departure of Raheem Sterling. We know that Surrey police have given an update on the circumstances following what happened on Saturday night. They said they were contacted just before 9 p.m. on Saturday evening after the occupants of the property came home and discovered a number of items, including jewellery and watches, had been stolen. They say inquiries to establish the circumstances are underway and that the investigation is ongoing. They said no threat of violence was involved. Gareth Southgate confirming he spoke with Raheem Sterling at length before he decided to head home yesterday to be with his family and 3 young children. Harry Kane, the England captain himself, said that it was very difficult to see a friend and a teammate in that kind of situation. Hopes, though, that Raheem Sterling, when the time is right, will be able to return to Doha here in Qatar to be able to link up with his teammates. There can be no doubt, Rita, though, whatever shape you look at it, whatever happens on Saturday, I think this match with France in the quarter-final, it certainly will be a defining moment of England's World Cup campaign.
John, thank you very much. John Watson reporting for us from Doha. The Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer is promising what he's calling the biggest ever transfer of power from Westminster if his party wins the next general election. In a report launched today, the party proposes greater powers for local mayors, scrapping the House of Lords and devolving more power to Scotland. Here's our political correspondent, Ian Watson.
It's a bold claim. Sir Keir Starmer says if he becomes Prime Minister, he'll transfer more power away from Westminster than any of his predecessors in history. To emphasise the point, he was in Leeds, not London, to launch the wide-ranging recommendations from someone who had led a previous government, the former Prime Minister Gordon Brown. But in the midst of a cost of living crisis, why on earth was Labour focusing on constitutional change?
This could not be more relevant. And, you know, I'm fed up to the back teeth with sticking plasters for the problems that we've got. The underlying problem is our economy isn't working. This is a strong, compelling set of recommendations. We've got to stop those in Westminster and Whitehall pretending that they know best about the communities that desperately want to play their part in the future. We're going to transfer that power to them, rebuild our economy.
Amidst a 155-page report, some recommendations stand out, including abolishing this place. The House of Lords would be replaced by an elected chamber representing the nations and regions of the UK. But it's worth saying, although Sir Keir Starmer says that the Lords is indefensible, he's now consulting on the Gordon Brown report. So this, and its other recommendations, aren't yet Labour policy. So what else is being considered? 50,000 civil service jobs could move from Whitehall to other parts of the UK. There may be more powers for the Scottish Government to negotiate international agreements as part of a plan for greater devolution short of independence.
We're breaking new ground. The ground on which the battle is fought in Scotland is changing forever. Because what we are saying is we are offering change within the UK that will benefit Scotland as against change by leaving the United Kingdom, which we think will do damage to Scotland.
Local councils and mayors will have new powers to promote economic growth, Labour's answer to levelling up. But there could be a sting in the tail, or rather in your pocket, as councils in England would also get new powers to raise revenue. So what is Keir Starmer trying to achieve? Well, he wants to convince voters that he has a political vision, that he really wants to change the country, while the Conservatives focus on changing leaders. But by moving power away from Westminster, he also is looking for much needed support from some of the people who backed Brexit or Scottish independence because they'd lost trust in this place. But the Conservatives say they've already moved decision-making powers and public sector jobs out of London. And they, unlike Labour, are now focusing on voters' priorities. They say Keir Starmer is playing politics. Well, you can almost see the dividing lines at the next general election being drawn up now. Ian Watson, BBC News, still at Westminster.
The latest trailer for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's Netflix documentary has been released. The company has confirmed Harry and Meghan, the Sussexes' behind-the-scenes docuseries, will debut this week. Here's an excerpt from the new trailer.
And then everything changed. There's a hierarchy of the family. You know, there's leaking, but there's also planting of stories.
There was a war against Meghan to suit other people's agendas.
It's about hatred. It's about race.
It's a dirty game.
Well, our royal correspondent Sean Coughlin is here. No doubting the tenor of this series, is there, from that trailer?
It's another slice of royal psychodrama, really. And no sign of them backing down, no sign of any olive branches. It's pretty tough and pretty aggressive, casting themselves very much as the victims of something approaching a conspiracy. We see the narrative of this trailer beginning with them having a very warm relationship with the public, being treated as rock stars, and how that soured. And we see Prince Harry linking that very strongly to his own mother, Princess Diana's experience too, and the pressures upon her. So it's a very toxic cocktail at the moment. Of course, this is only a trailer, we should say as well, so it's going to be souped up to be made exciting. And it'll be interesting to see how much people like this, you know, what the reaction to this will be fascinating, both officially and unofficially. And do we have a date for when this is coming out? Thursday. The first drop is on Thursday of 3 episodes, and then the following week there'll be another 3 parts. And so far we see these big issues being raised about race, about the royal family, the hierarchy, the press, relationships between Prince Harry and Meghan with the press. We also saw them on that balcony at Buckingham Palace, from which they were famously excluded, the Jubilee. They weren't allowed onto it. So all these things is a mixture of symbolism, media imagery, and also a lot of sort of psychology as well, perhaps. Sean, thank you very much. Sean Coughlin there. Schools across the UK are facing difficult decisions as they cope with the cost of living crisis, including rising heating bills and also staff costs. It comes as the Head Teachers Union tells the BBC that the poorest and most vulnerable families are increasingly turning to schools for support. Our education correspondent Elaine Dunkley has been to a primary school in Wigan, which is using inventive ways to help families in the run-up to Christmas.
Oh, Holly, tell me about the fabulous work you're doing.
As the cost of living crisis deepens, there's increasing pressure on school funds.
Well done, Dan.
This is Wesley Methodist Primary School in Wigan. Head teacher Mrs Moragregor is worried about the future of the school if things continue the way they are.
We've seen our energy bills at the moment increasing by up to 50%. We've put in the budget for this year about £40,000 to cover the cost of gas and electric. We're heating the school just enough to keep us all warm, but then, you know, we've got to be really, really careful. Currently, we're seeing an increase to teachers' pay and support staff salaries. We're looking at spending over £1 million on staffing this year, which is phenomenal.
So these 2 trips are the one where we need to contribute the most.
At least once a day, Mrs Moragregor checks in with the school's finance manager.
Paper has gone from £1.99 to £3.19 a ream. We do need a magic wand in this place at the moment.
Won't be a second.
In the kitchen, the cost of putting school dinners on plates is rising.
We try and make the plates as full as we can, so that at least we know that these kids have got one decent meal a day.
Dinner lady Lorna is already thinking about the school Christmas lunch.
I bet is at the minute you're a little bit, are they going to have a Christmas dinner this year? Because we don't know what they're facing when they go home.
Thank you.
Luckily, we can do it here and we can give them that experience. We've got crackers coming in, we decorate the tables and make it really joyful for them.
For pupils too, the cost of living crisis weighs heavy on their minds.
When you're cold, you'll need to get like a jumper on or something instead of turning on the heating because it's just got too expensive.
My mum said like this year Father Christmas can't get as much as things that you did last year.
We see children coming in and they are worried about the cost of living, they are worried about everything going up in price. They see the stress that the parents are under. You see it very much in outbursts of emotion that they just can't put words to.
The government says it will invest an additional £2.3 billion per year in schools in England. But many head teachers fear that with prices continuing to rise, it might not be enough.
Feels relentless. There will come a point where we think, actually, there's no more we can do there until we start to get more support and more funding.
Elaine Dunkley, BBC News in Wigan.
The time is just after 1:15. Our top story this lunchtime. And still to come, we report from China, where the government has been signalling a shift in its COVID stance after recent protests.
Coming up on the BBC News Channel, England's cricketers pull off one of their greatest victories as James Anderson and Ollie Robinson lead their side to a 74-run win over Pakistan in the first test in Rawalpindi.
Human rights groups are warning about the security situation in Haiti, where they say that heavily armed gangs are in control of more than half of the capital, Port-au-Prince, as well as surrounding areas. The crimes they commit include increasing incidences of rape. In the first 6 months of the year, the United Nations documented 934 killings in the capital and 680 kidnappings. Violence has escalated since the assassination of the country's sitting president, Jovenel Moïse, in July of 2021. As our senior international correspondent Orla Guerin reports from the Haitian capital, the UN is warning that the country is on the verge of an abyss. Her report contains distressing testimony of sexual violence.
This is gang territory in Port-au-Prince, almost as far as the eye can see. But it seems the world isn't looking. And the Haitian capital has become a gangster's paradise. It's morning in a middle-class suburb. Minutes after a shootout, a show of force by the police. But usually it's the gangs who call the shots. There are over 100 armed groups in the city, instilling fear and silence. Well, police are still searching the scene here. There's an AK-47 on the ground and some ammunition. There are also drops of blood. Now, this is an armoured car. Police say they were tracking it for about 2 weeks. They say it was being used by a kidnap gang. It's about 8 in the morning here, and morning and evening rush hours are peak time for the kidnappers.
There was a battle with police officers and the bad guys. One of them died, and we got the vehicle, and this is one of the weapons the bad guys had in their hands.
Do they have many armoured vehicles, the kidnappers?
I don't know. There are plenty. I'm sure there are plenty.
Nearby, the body of an alleged gang member. The police told us we stopped them today. Across town, Francois St. Clair has just been patched up at a trauma hospital run by Doctors Without Borders. He saw gunmen holding up 2 cars in front of his. When he tried to get away, he got a bullet in the arm. Have you ever thought that the violence is so bad here that you would like to leave Haiti?
Oh, 10,000 fois.
10,000 times, he tells me. I can't even call my mum to tell her what happened to me because she's getting older.
C'est mieux.
In the end, the way things are, it's better to leave if you can.
C'est bien.
Claudette is another recent victim of the gangs. She was hit by a stray bullet and lost her leg. I don't know how I'll manage, she says. I can't run and walk the way I used to. She worries she will never marry now. Gang warfare often erupts here in broad daylight. Why not? Gunmen are in league with corrupt politicians and have some police on the payroll. That's according to human rights campaigners who say the gangs of Port-au-Prince have no limits. There are many here with stories that are harrowing to tell and to hear, like this man. His neighbourhood is controlled by a gang whose rivals came on a killing spree. For his safety, we are not naming the area or the armed group involved.
I was in the house and I was so scared, I was shaking. I didn't know what to do. They mostly kill young men. My wife took me and hid me under the bed and covered me with piles of clothes. And my nephew was hiding in the wardrobe.
Soon the gunmen were in his house. When his nephew ran from his hiding place, they chased him and killed him.
What hurts me the most is that when I was under the bed, I couldn't see, but I could hear the men raping my wife. They were raping her, and I was under the bed, and I could say nothing.
There are things you would never wish on anyone, he says. His wife is now pregnant, and they don't know if he is the father. He tells us Haiti has been erased from their hearts. Some police here are risking their lives, trying to make the streets safe. But others have actually formed their own gang. And Haiti's weak and tainted government is accused of looking the other way as the crisis deepens. Orla Guerin, BBC News, Port-au-Prince.
And that report was by our senior international correspondent, Orla Guerin. Now, talks aimed at preventing rail strikes from causing further travel disruption before Christmas are expected to take place today. The latest round of strikes by members of the RMT at Network Rail and 14 train companies is due to begin next week. The Rail Delivery Group said that its offer, which has been rejected by the union, included a pay increase for staff of up to 8% over 2 years. Well, our transport correspondent Katie Austin is outside the RMT's headquarters in central London for us now. Katie, just bring us up to date with what's going on.
Well, this dispute has been rumbling on for months now, but in the past few days there has been a sense of urgency about seeing if anything can be done to stop those strikes going ahead starting next Tuesday. And yesterday, for the first time, the Rail Delivery Group, which has been representing the train companies in negotiations, said that a 4% pay rise for this year and another 4% next year would be possible, but there would have to be changes to working practices. And examples of that include repurposing or closing ticket offices and the staff who work there having new multi-skilled roles, putting Sunday working in contracts where that's not already the case, and drivers operating train doors in more areas. Now, last night the RMT rejected this, saying it wasn't acceptable and it has concerns about some of those proposed changes. I understand there has been a meeting this morning with the Rail Delivery Group to see if anything can be done to reach a settlement still. And separately, meanwhile, Network Rail, which employs workers including those who do maintenance and the signallers, it updated its existing offer yesterday. So that now includes 5% pay increase this year and a 4% pay increase next year, plus some other benefits. But Network Rail has also said that reforms have to happen for pay to go up. Now, the RMT's National Executive Committee is going to be considering that updated offer from Network Rail today. So with all these meetings going on, everyone's waiting now to see if there will be any further update from the RMT later this afternoon.
Thanks very much, Katie. China has been signalling a shift in its COVID stance as it moves to ease some virus restrictions despite high daily case numbers. Although this stops well short of a complete reopening, it is being seen as a sign that officials have abandoned the idea of trying to reduce each outbreak to 0 new infections. The changes come in the wake of street protests in many cities, with residents calling for an end to the policy of zero COVID. Our China correspondent Stephen McDonnell reports.
Beijing's underground trains are starting to look more crowded again.
Commuters no longer need a recent PCR test in order to enter a station. In some Chinese cities, shopping centres have also removed the COVID test requirement as a prerequisite for entry. Even in places where infections have not come down, office workers are heading back to their buildings. But the quiet streets in the capital show just how far China has to go to return to normal. A recent spate of anti-zero COVID protests showed the Communist Party just how sick of virus restrictions the public had become. Then the death of former leader Jiang Zemin made the situation even more difficult for Xi Jinping's administration. Many people remember the Jiang era as a time of opening and high-speed growth. Then they compare this to now. Also, fears that popular mourning could lead to greater tensions have meant no public participation at his funeral. So the focus has been on changing COVID provisions as a way of gradually easing the pressure.
The government here was never going to come out and say to people, look, sorry, we've probably kept these heavy restrictions on you for much longer than we should have. Instead, it's opted for the line that the virus has changed, therefore our responses to it can change. Well, those who've been out in the street protesting, demanding an end to zero COVID, they don't care how officials word it, as long as they can get their old lives back.
The recent easing of COVID restriction is actually in the best interest of most people. It's not too fast and it's not too slow.
I think the changes are definitely good. We've been waiting for our work and our lives to return to normal. Of course, it isn't enough. You can see the traffic, but work hasn't resumed properly. Kids aren't back in school. We want this to change as soon as possible.
It seems the government has given up on its goal of reducing each outbreak to zero infections. But it fears a rush on the hospitals if it moves too quickly. So, a broader opening up is expected to take many more months. Stephen McDonald, BBC News, Beijing.
England's cricketers have produced one of their most memorable performances overseas to win the first test against Pakistan by 74 runs in a nail-biting final session in Rawalpindi. It's only the third test match England have ever won in Pakistan. Joe Wilson watched the day unfold.
England in Pakistan. They'd come for fun, they'd come to win. They'd come with James Anderson. He took the first wicket of this epic final day. Pakistan needed runs for victory, Mohammad Rizwan. Their target, 343, was feasible, reachable. Shakil Saud got himself to 50. And count the score, count the crowd. The seats were filling. Pakistan's chances were growing. In response, Anderson again.
He's all gone.
Rizwan gone. England kept their fielders close. Shakil gave a chance and Keaton Jennings flung himself to catch it. The volunteers were ready to bat, but now the men in the middle were surviving and that victory total was approaching. England, after tea, just found more. Azhar Ali gone for 40. James Anderson is still going at 40.
Oh, out, surely.
And now there was just one more wicket to take. See the tension. But look at the sun setting. Just minutes left in the day when Leach struck.
Oh, close, very close, given.
268 all out. On a pitch, in a match of record run scoring, England somehow conjured the wickets to win. Led by Ben Stokes, they'd made their test return to Pakistan a spectacle, a triumph for the sport. Joe Wilson, BBC News.
Time for a look at the weather now. Here's Helen Willits. That looks cold behind you, Helen, and it is cold.
It is cold, Rita, and that cold air's put its feet under the table. It's here for a while. In fact, it's going to get colder. So we have all noticed the change in season, the change in the weather. But as I say, this week, colder still, widespread frosts, and the Met Office have already issued their first warning of disruptive snow, particularly in the north. I'll come to that in just a moment. The reason we're engulfed, or we will be engulfed, by that cold northerly wind right the way from the Arctic. But in the last couple of days, we've had this rather dull, grey easterly wind dragging its showers into eastern areas along the south coast as well. But just the hint of that change to the north wind across the north of Scotland now through the remainder of the day. There, of course, is some sunshine, as you saw on the satellite picture as well, particularly Scotland, western areas. But temperatures are struggling now. We're back to the seasonal norm, perhaps just a little bit below 6 to 9 degrees Celsius today. Overnight tonight, though, that northerly wind starts to make its presence felt more widely and breaks up the clouds, so the frost come the morning will be much more widespread, down to -1, -2, scraping the cars, I think, tomorrow morning, and a change in where we'll see our showers as well. But look at this, the blue, the frost is getting more widespread and deeper as well, so a more penetrating frost, particularly as the wind picks up later in the week. So some very icy cold weather to come, the coldest snap of the season so far, and with it the risk of ice and snow. For tomorrow, though, more sunshine. The showers mostly of rain coming down from the North Sea coast, 1 or 2 for the north of Northern Ireland, coming down the Irish Sea as well. But by the end of the day, certainly snow over the tops of the mountains at lower levels across the Northern Isles, and temperatures will be a degree or 2 lower as well. And that process continues as that feed of northerly winds enhances on Wednesday. So the wind strengthens as well, so it'll feel even more bitter. And the snow showers, well, start to become more significant, more frequent, heavier, and hence that yellow warning from the Met Office. Disruptive snow blizzards as well because of the strength of the wind blowing that snow around. And just look at the temperatures on Wednesday. I think it's cold enough now, but 3 to 5 degrees Celsius and feeling significantly colder. And of course, that very frosty start to contend with both Wednesday and indeed Thursday morning. Little fly in the ointment on Thursday. We really need to watch this because the air is cold. So wherever those showers come inland, they could well fall as snow, not just Thursday, but beyond that, Friday into the weekend. Rita.
Thank you, I think. Thank you, Helen. All right, that's all from the BBC News at 1, so it's goodbye from me. And on BBC One, we join the BBC's news teams where you are. Bye-bye.